Chapter 38. Dead Reckoning. 20 miles. We'd sailed thousands of miles over the ocean, crossing vast expanses of the globe, and now our lives depended on the distance I could walk between breakfast and supper. I sat in the center of the boat, swinging my makeshift oars. I'd lashed them together from the washed-up rigging and broken bits of timber I'd collected on the beach. We had a chipped bottle half full of water we'd drained off the rocks, extra rope, and a tin cup for bailing. Our rowboat was in better shape than I thought, but it still leaked. Every hour we had to stop to scoop out the water that collected in its hull. We had started out much later than I wanted, but I was too afraid of getting caught in a storm to wait for morning. Now that we were on the water, it seemed that my fears were unfounded, at least for now. Sheets of low clouds spread over the sky, but they weren't the fat, rain-carrying sort. The sun wouldn't set until nearly 10 o'clock, so at least we had daylight on our side. We were out of sight of the little rocky island, but I knew we hadn't gone more than a few miles yet. Already, my palms burned from rubbing against the oars. Even though I'd ripped the cuffs off my pants and wrapped them around my hands to protect them, they still blistered up beneath the fabric. Bo sat on the bench in front of me, wrapped in my cloak, watching the sky nervously. "Stop doing that," I said. "My auntie once told me that if you watch the sky, it won't rain. If that were true, no one in Anlung would ever look down." 3 inches of water sloshed in a pool beneath his feet. "Time to bail again." He picked up the cup sitting on the bench beside him. "No, here, let me do that." I set down my oars and took the cup from him. I wanted him to stay as dry as possible. I like bailing. It gives my shoulders a rest. "I should row for a while." He looked at me worriedly. "You're getting tired." "Not at all," I chirped. I slung water over the side of the boat. "I could row us halfway back to Mencon. You lie down and rest. We'll be off again in a minute." The sky never cleared that whole long day. When the sun finally went down, the moon glowed behind the thin clouds. I could see the waves in our boat, but no stars. Without the stars, I couldn't tell our heading. The smart thing to do was to stop rowing and wait for the clouds to clear. Otherwise, I could be taking us completely off course. I released the oars and set my aching hands, palms up, on the tops of my knees. Even if I knew which way we were going, I couldn't row another stroke. My shoulders and back felt stiff as boards. Bo lay on his side, his knees drawn up to his chest. He'd been in that position for hours. I was sure he was asleep, but as I reached over to cover him with my cloak, he opened his eyes. "You should drink some water," he said weakly. "I just did," I lied. "It's your turn now." He licked his cracked lips before taking a sip from the bottle. "I've been dreaming about food. Barbecued octopus on a stick, smoky and black from the grill." I made a face. "You and Master Payun. I'd give my right arm for a bowl of noodles from the 3 Onions Cafe." "Tell me a story about Anlung," he whispered. I sat quiet for a long moment. I knew Bo wanted a true story, but I didn't have many good ones to choose from. Maybe it was because birthdays were on my mind that I chose the one I did. My 6th birthday. My mother was already gone by then, killed by one of those quick diseases that swept through the fens in winter, leaving it emptier by springtime. Mud never mentioned her, and I couldn't remember much about her other than skirts swishing around me as I played on the floor. And I remembered her frying me duck eggs. I didn't have any early memories of Mud at all. I guess that's because while she was alive, he must have been working all the time. But after she died, Mud filled my world. The year I turned 6 was hard, with not much to eat most days. Mud couldn't keep a job. We were in and out of friends' houses, sleeping on shop steps and inside boxes stuffed with paper. I spent most of my days begging or searching the trash for thrown-out food. But then, just as the weather started to get cold, Mud came to me and told me he'd found work. Best of all, he'd found us a place to live. It was a shabby 1-room apartment, but it was a palace compared to what we'd been used to. And we had food on a fairly regular basis. He'd bring me lunch, then he'd be gone the rest of the day. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find he'd come home and was sleeping on the floor beside the bed. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to the temple bells. When I looked around the room, I was shocked to see the far wall stacked with piles of wrapped presents. I hopped out of bed and tiptoed over to them. I had never had birthday presents that I could remember. I didn't want to touch them. I was so afraid they would vanish into a dream. Mud woke up and raised himself onto his elbow. "Happy birthday, Psy girl." I ran to him and threw my arms around his thick neck and kissed his cheek. "Really? Mud, are those presents really for me?" "Every one. Go on. Don't you want to open them?" I tore into the packages. There was a baby doll and a wind-up dog, a painted tin elephant, and a set of cups that stacked inside each other. There was a new pair of shoes, much too big for me. And in the last box, one golden link, shaped like a teardrop, hung from a red silk cord. I gasped and looked up at him. He nodded, his eyes gleaming brighter than the present itself. "It's real, Psy, stamped and everything. We'll keep it till you turn 13. I know it's only one, but everyone's got to start somewhere, don't they?" I squealed and hugged him tight, then jumped as our door slammed open. 2 policemen stomped into the room and grabbed Mud by the arms. He didn't seem surprised to see them, and he didn't resist the arrest. As they cuffed his wrist and dragged him out the door, he kept his eyes down and didn't look at me. Not once. I was wailing and clutching the toy elephant to my stomach. I didn't stop screaming until another officer finally came in and carried me off. He took away the toys and the lineal link and everything else and dumped me at the girls' home, my first visit there of many. I had to wait for 6 months for Mud to be released and come and get me. The girls' home headmaster told me that Mud had been pretending to shine shoes outside the palace gates. It was a cover so he could pick all the minister's pockets, which was how he'd afforded the apartment. The day before my birthday, he'd stolen a gold pocket watch and sold it to buy me the lineal link. I'll never forget the day he got out of jail and came to sign me out of the home. He didn't hug me or pick me up. He barely even looked at me. And afterward, he never mentioned the gifts or my birthday at all. It was like the whole thing had never happened. I looked at Beau. He had gone back to sleep. I pulled the wool cloak up to cover his shoulders. I sat back down, watching him and watching the sea until I fell asleep, too. I woke with a jolt. The sky had grown lighter, revealing a thick fog that must have formed during the night. I stood up to get to the oars, but my vision went black at the edges, and I stumbled. I put my hands out to brace myself and knocked the best oar into the water. "No, no," I cried, grasping for it. Too late. I watched it bob farther and farther out of reach while the fog rolled in more thickly all around us. In desperation, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Payun's eyeglass. I swiveled it from the case and held it up in front of me. For a half-second, I imagined it illuminating the way for me like a beacon, but the fog was too thick, and I couldn't see anything. Even if I'd had the best equipment in the world, I wouldn't have been able to tell our position, but it didn't matter. We should have made landfall hours ago. We were adrift, somewhere far off course. Tears began rolling down my cheeks. The salt stung my face, but I was too exhausted to wipe the tears away. Every part of me was heavy and stiff as stone. My body begged me to lie down in the boat and sleep my way toward whatever our fate might be. I lowered the eyeglass. As I brought it down, I caught sight of my own hand through the lens. I waved my fingers beneath it. The angle and the dim light made them look thick and blocky, as though they belonged to someone else. I shut my eyes. Ever since that 6th birthday, I'd thought Mud was heartless for not meeting my gaze that day he got out of jail, for never apologizing for what he'd done. Now I understood why he couldn't look at me then. It was the same reason I hadn't been able to look at Payun's face at Avon's Island. Mud had been too ashamed to meet my eyes, not because he didn't care about me, but because he cared too much. He disappointed me. He disappointed himself. Life had put him to the test, and he'd failed completely. I would never call Mud a good father, but he had wanted me to have a better life. He'd wanted it so badly that he would have done anything to give it to me. I couldn't see it then, but I could see it now. I opened my eyes, releasing another stream of tears. I had been trying so hard to run from my past, but the past was like modelfish ink. Even if it fades, it's still there, and not even the ocean can wash it out. I couldn't change what had come before, but I could change what I did next. I put the eyeglass back in my pocket and wiped my face on my sleeve. Taking the last oar out of its lock, I climbed up onto the prow of the boat. I lay on my stomach and dipped the oar down on one side, lifted it, then dipped it again on the other. The water felt as thick as honey. My shoulders were on fire, and my hands shook with the effort. I raised and lowered my arms, keeping a beat in my head so I wouldn't stop. One side, then the other. Right side, left side. Dawn, dark. Truth, lie. Friend, foe. Father, daughter. Tail, teeth. On and on. Go on. Go on. When I brought my oar down again, the surface surged up to meet it. I gasped and held the oar still. A spray of salt water shot into the air and rained down on me. The white backs of a dozen whales flitted past our boat like silent ghosts. I watched them, mesmerized by their white pearl glow. And then a long, dark shape followed the whales, snaking directly beneath us. I jerked my oar out of the water and sat straight up. I waited, watching the surface as my heart pounded in my ears. Slowly, a thick, scaled snout rose in front of the prow. Higher, then higher. Nostrils the size of teacups unsealed and exhaled. I staggered back, sloshing into the bilge at the bottom of the boat. Drops of seawater beaded up and streamed down the slake's bearded neck as she rose above the surface. Her dark scales shimmered like flagstones after a rain. I held frozen, staring at the beast as the waves slapped lazily against the boat's hull. The slake tilted her slender head, regarding me as though she were a curious bird. She held perfectly still as one translucent golden lens slid down over her gleaming eye. The haw, the second eyelid. A dragon haw shows you the true nature of a thing. The slake stared at me through her haw. She looked at me the way Master Payun had looked at me all those months ago in the shop. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. The beast blinked once, then slipped back under the water without a splash. I gasped, filling my lungs with air. I sat still, clutching my oar, wondering if I'd had some strange waking dream. Then I shook my head to clear it. I scrambled back to my seat. Dumpling had told me that the slake protected the Sunderlands. I never thought I would find myself listening to Dumpling, but our only chance was to follow this dragon home. With the last of my strength, I rowed after her, digging the oar deep into the water on either side of me. Finally, our boat pierced the fog. I heard the sudden roar of waves crashing against sand, and straight ahead loomed the dark, jungle-topped slopes of the great southern continent. "Bo, wake up," I whispered. "We made it."